Don't develop a monochromatic life. Don't just sit at your desk, do spreadsheets, or work till midnight, not taste the opportunities around you.
When we met, I don't know if you remember this, but you were working out of a kind of a back corner of the big Apex offices.
Oh yeah, sure. It was during the transition.
Yeah, running a little pocket of money. We met because we were both looking at this wonky deal in Rochester, New York, started by
Lofty something.
Started by a...
Which is a great idea, great idea that, and Google, of course, wiped them out.
But the fact that you were there, you got on a plane, you went to Rochester, New York, and you were like digging in to the weeds with this guy who was just getting started, that made a big impression on me from the beginning.
I've always, practiced this business. If you're going to be in it, you want to be in it, and not on the periphery.
Was it obvious to you from the time you were a kid that you were going to be a finance person in New York?
All I knew is I wasn't going to be a stockbroker. I knew I wanted to work on Wall Street. My room when I lived in my family apartment, the wallpaper was virtually covers of annual reports. So I obviously was kind of into it, but my father had only coached me on one thing, that I shouldn't become on the selling side of the business, and fortunately, I've stayed out of that side.
Do you remember the very first deal you did that would fit in the definition of what we now call venture?
I remember it as if it were yesterday. I had worked for a firm by the name of Central National Corporation. Every once in a while, one of the scions of Wall Street would bring a deal to the guy who was the head of our operation. No one else in the firm was interested, and I got interested in all these cockamamie small companies that no one wanted to pay any attention to because they weren't big enough investments, and they didn't know what they did. It was a 26-year-old entrepreneur who would work for American Metals Climax, which was one of the biggest metals companies. It's hard to conceive even of someone who wanted to go into the scrap metal business coming into a venture capitalist office today. But it was, a new area. It wasn't even called venture capital. Right. It was the deal business. It wasn't until about 73, I think, when we formed the National Venture Capital Association, the industry was formalized. We had the most effervescent small cap IPO market during that time. And it was very much a retail investor, family investor. It was kind of a long, euphoric period where the Intels of the world were coming out and Datascope went public. It's almost inconceivable to someone in the venture business today to realize that you could go public with a company with a total market cap of $10 million and raise $2 million. As you know, today, institutional buyers want a minimum individually of $50, $100 million because their portfolios are so big.
You were a venture capitalist in New York in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Silicon Valley was becoming what it has become, certainly in the 80s and by the 90s, but you stayed here. Why did you stay here?
Oh, come on. You know me well enough. I mean, can you imagine me literally in Silicon Valley? I'm not the type. I'm a New Yorker. I thrive on this kind of a lifestyle. I'm in the art world. I'm in the theater world. I started the first discotheque in New York. I was chairman of the board of New York Magazine. I've lived this kind of life. I wouldn't even dream of giving it up to live out in Sunnyvale.
Did you ever feel like you were sacrificing by being here?
It was a tough slog in the 80s or 90s. We were fighting in New York a losing battle of convincing people that it was safe to live here, they wouldn't get mugged, that the transportation was good and it wasn't dirty, that the schools were better than they think they are. If you wanted to hire someone, and you know this as well as I do, to leave a good job at San Francisco and move to New York City, you would get so far in the interview cycle, you'd bring them in for an interview, and then you get the same story, I'm not moving to New York. Today, I think they'd be jumpy at the bit to move to New York and take a job.
When you think back, Silicon Alley 1.0 during the internet bubble of the late 90s, that burst, almost all the companies died, 9/11 happens, New York's in an even tougher spot. We went from thinking we had a burgeoning tech ecosystem to having effectively none. You then made a bet on this market. Was there a singular moment or two that you look back and say, that's when I knew or really believed that the tech ecosystem here was going to come back and was going to endure?
I could feel the pulse of New York and startups beginning to emerge and the whole information economy, but there are many indicators.
New York City now, in the last several quarters, has been running at about 80% of the pace of Silicon Valley in terms of numbers of deals, and in particular numbers of seed deals. So we're creating new companies here at almost the pace of Silicon Valley. Would you have ever imagined that 10, 15 years ago? And do you think ultimately we might surpass the Bay Area?
Yes, I think it's possible. Did I think it was possible, though? Not at that time. All the tech companies came out of Fairchild Semiconductor and then the whole Stanford atmosphere, and we didn't have that here. I would say today, New York will give a good run for technology and for the places where things are happening. I think what we've got is a reservoir of people who've got enormous energy, who don't get defeated, and the spirit of this city is unbeatable at the moment. This is where the action is.
So when you started your third venture firm, Primetime, what's the most important thing that you had learned from the first two that you said needed to continue with it? And what is the biggest learning that you said, I want to do this differently this time?
We're a startup seed investment firm, which has its challenges. You know as well as I do, it's a difficult area to make investments in young companies. I've been very careful about making sure that we have enough money to get to some proof of purpose, or that the fact that this is a viable entity. And I also have developed a discipline to say when to walk away, much better than I was before. Also, I am very disciplined about valuation.
What are the New York companies in your portfolio right now that you're most excited about?
We have two companies, Sheer Health, which has got a very exciting new concept. We all have lots of medical bills and we don't read the statements, and we don't understand, I would say not just half, we don't understand any of what we've gotten, and we don't know how to sort it, we don't know how to argue or debate it or try to get recoveries. Sheer Health has started for that exact purpose, using AI, by the way. And we have another company called Carda Health, which has found a technology, or developed a technology and using AI as well for treating people with post-cardiac some episode who have gone home and been able to deal with them on in effect, a one-on-one basis, but they're really dealing with many people on a one-on-one basis who don't realize they're not the only person who's being interacted with, which is growing also dramatically.
2022, you're 50 plus years into your venture career, and you decide to write a book. Why?
Very fair question. Why did I write a book after all these years? I had time. My wife, who passed away, it gave me a chance to think about a lot of things, and I decided I wanted to write a book, no red lights, because that's the way I live my life. Yeah. And I felt I had something to share, and I wrote it for two audiences. One audience was the fact that for older people to say, don't pack up and go to Florida and play golf or go to Palm Springs. Think about something you could do to restart. If you're going to live like I am to 114, you've got a lot of time to fill. And at 60, you're just halfway through your life. So that was one group. And the other group was young people. But I wanted to write and say to them, don't develop a monochromatic life. Don't just sit at your desk and do spreadsheets or work till midnight and not taste the opportunities around you. This is a great time in your life to get involved early stage in philanthropy, in politics, in art, and make yourself into a well-rounded person.
You've decided and declared that you're going to live to 114. How did you choose 114?
I went to a talk about 15 years ago given by a gerontologist from Mount Sinai who explained why technically you could live to 114. But I liked the idea of 114, and I started saying I'm going to live to 114, and I've been saying it ever since. And interestingly, I think that if I went to that same lecture today, I'm convinced that same gerontologist or someone else would say 120 because of the developments in the biotech industry, in the nutrition, in exercise, all the things that all of us practice that enable us to live longer.
Last year you ran the New York Marathon.
At age 88.
At age 88, setting the record for the oldest person ever.
For finishing.
For finishing.
Not time.
Right. So at 114, what do you want your legacy to be?
A good reputation. I just turned 90 2 weeks ago. Whatever we are today is not because of something you did this week or last month. It's a cumulative process. You started out early in your career and you built a reputation of being a certain kind of person. So that to me is a fabulous legacy.